Hello, fifth graders. Today we are looking at the big question, how can we divide a decimal by a decimal? Our objective is that you can divide a decimal by another decimal. And by the end of this, you're going to be able to solve a problem that looks like this. But first, let's think about if we wanted to buy some bottles of water, and each bottle, draw my bottle of water here, each bottle costs $1.20. You go to the store with $3.60. So what's a quick way that you could figure out how many bottles of water you could buy? Well, we would want division. $3.60 divided by $1.20. Now, in an earlier video, you might remember us saying, okay, well, let's talk about what we see here, and $3.60 is the same as 360 what? What place value is that zero in? Well, it would be the same as 360 hundredths. And how about $1.20? Well, it's 120, and where does the zero land? In the hundredths place. So it would be 360 hundredths divided by 120 hundredths. And since we have hundredths and hundredths, we know that we can cancel these out. So that brings us to 360 divided by 120. If we do our long division, we can do 120 goes into 360 3 times, which is 360, which means we can buy 3 bottles of water. So what did we just do here? Well, a shortcut to this, if we think about putting the decimals back into the problem here, let's think about where these decimals went. Well, in our divisor, the $1.20, if we took the decimal and we moved it over until $1.20 was a whole number, 1, 2, that would give us 120. Now, the common rule that we hear a lot in math is if you do it on the if you do it over here, you got to do it over there. So right here, since we did 2 on the outside, we want to do 2 on the inside. That's 1 and that's 2. So whatever you do to the outside, you have to do to the inside. Let's try another one for practice. Let's try $1.25 divided by 25 cents. So we can do it 2 options again, right? We can think about, okay, well, we have hundredths and hundredths, or we can use our decimal shortcut with starting with the number on the outside. We want to make the divisor a whole number. So how do we do that? We move the decimal point over once and twice to make it 25. You might hear my dog drinking her water. She is super loud. All right. So this decimal, because the outside one went twice, the inside decimal goes twice. 1 and 2, which gives us 125. Now, what if it doesn't give us a whole number on the inside? Is that still okay? Well, if we look at another one here, let's do that same example, but this time let's make our dividend, instead of 1.25, let's go 1.255. Now what happens? Well, if you thought, well, we still got to make the divisor a whole number by going once and twice. And does the inside go twice? Yes, because the outside went twice. 1, 2. It's okay for the dividend not to be a whole number, because if you remember what we do with that decimal point, remember when we talked about this division house here being our mansion, that decimal point's going to go on the elevator and go straight up. And now we're done with the decimal. Now we can do our long division. 25 goes into 1. No, so nothing's going to be above the 1. 25 goes into 12, can't be done. 25 goes into 125, yes, 5 times. So that goes here because we're dealing with 125. So that's why it goes above here. Then we're going to subtract our 125. We multiplied 25 times 5 to get 125. Now we're subtracting. Remember, does McDonald's sell burgers? Once we get that, we get 0, and then we bring down our next digit, which is a 5. Does 25 go into 5? No, which means that is going to be our remainder. Now, in a few more lessons, we're going to learn how to deal with this decimal point, or deal with this remainder, and I'm going to show you how to get a decimal as your quotient, but right now we can still use remainders. Now, another way when dividing decimals by decimals, or to check your work, is if we have a problem like this, 2 1/10 divided by 7/10, and I want to write it like this, is to think about using the inverse operation of multiplication, which means we can say, okay, what times 7/10, so 7/10 times what would give us 2 1/10? Well, I see two numbers that go really well together, a 7 and a 21. I know that 7 times 3 equals 21. So I can test that out. What if I did 7 times 3? Would it equal 2.1? Well, if we follow our rules from our earlier lessons, 7/10 times 3 is 20, or 7 times 3 is 21. Then I'm going to look at my decimal point here. I'm going to count how many digits are behind all my decimals. It's just 1. So the decimal point's going to move 1 time, and it's going to give me 2.1. So that worked. So that's another way to figure out these problems. Now, if we look back over here, let's solve this one. See if you can beat me here before I get it done. How'd you do? Okay, our final task here is to go back to the original objective. And I want you to write down these 3 problems. 2 56/100 divided by 4/100. And then I want you to write down 25 6/10 divided by 4/10. And then I want you to write down 256 divided by 4. Does anyone have any predictions? What do you think these answers are going to look like? Well, one thing I noticed right away is our decimal point up here and our decimal point here compared to this decimal point and this decimal point. What happened? Well, to me, it looks like the decimal point came over 1 time. And same thing over here, came over 1 time compared to this up here. And then if we look down again, what happens from here to here? Well, it looks like, again, the decimal point went from here over 1 time, and from here over 1 time. So if we put this in our division house, right away we can see the divisor is not a whole number, so we'd want to take that decimal and move it over until we have a whole number. So it's going to be once and twice. And whenever we do the outside, we're going to do the inside. That's once and twice. And what does that give us? Well, it gives us 256 divided by 4. Looks very familiar. How about this middle one, though? Would that give us the same answer, too? Let's try it. 25 6/10 divided by 4/10. Okay, where do we start? Well, the decimal for the divisor. We're going to move this over until we have a whole number. And this just takes one jump to give us 4, which means on the inside, we're going to do the same thing. So what this tells us is, I know 256 divided by 4 is 64. So what do you think this problem is going to be? If you said the same, you're correct. And what about this problem? Right, the same. Always get 64 with any of these, because of the relationship is that the decimal point moved the same amount in both the divisor and dividend, and the quotients were the same. So remember, the first number is the dividend here, and this number is the divisor.